Alrighty, so today I'm gonna be doing like tech support scammer. Tech support scammer plays Black Ops 2. Be real cool. So yeah, tech support scammer plays Black Ops 2. Let's begin. So we're gonna go to free for all because it'll be easier. We're gonna do tech support scammer rages at Black Ops 2. Alright, so I just turned on my mic. No, we're trying to find a lobby. So let's go to maybe multi-team? I don't know. Black Ops 2. Alright. Hello, sir. What is your problem and how can I help you today, sir? Sir, what is your problem? That guy's probably a modder. Hello, sir. Can I help you today? Hello, sir. Can I help you today? What is the problem? Sir, what is the problem today? Sir? Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Just leave that. And another modder. Alright guys, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna speak louder so you guys can actually hear. More possible modders, because level 1s, like no one would be level 1 on Call of Duty. Hello sir, what is your problem? How can I help you today?
War That You Didn't Know, many of you requested a similar episode about World War II. We heard you, and we're delivering. We're sure you already know that World War II was the deadliest war in history, fought between 1939 to 1945, and claiming somewhere in the region of 60 to 70 million lives. But what don't you know? That's what we'll find out today, in this episode of the Infographic Show, 50 Facts About World War II That You Didn't Know. Number 50, Alliances. So, who was involved? Well, it's kinda complicated because there were main combatants and countries just caught up in the war. Those main combatants were the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Then you had countries that signed the Tripartite Pact, which basically meant they were on the side of this powerful triumvirate. They were Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, and Slovakia. They were fighting against the Allied powers, which you probably know included Britain and the US, add to that Australia, Brazil, Canada, Newfoundland, New Zealand, South Africa, and of course the Soviet Union. It gets more complicated because a lot of countries supported the Allied powers, too many to mention here, but the Allied powers list of countries numbers about 50. Then you have countries that were already at war with the Axis powers, i.e. the Republic of China, that suffered huge loss of life against Japan, and countries that were neutral but were invaded. France might spring to mind. They became an ally in 1944 under leader Charles de Gaulle, but did you know Singapore, Morocco, Norway, New Guinea, and Thailand also invaded? You also had countries that changed sides, such as Finland. The world has never seen conflict that spilled so far and wide. Some countries' involvement in the war is complicated, so this is just a basic summary of who was involved. Number 49, Nomenclature. While Karl Marx had used the term World War, it's thought the name World War I entered popular usage after a Time magazine article in 1938. In the same story, the magazine talked about another possible war of nations and said this might be World War II. Number 48, Young Hitler. German leader Adolf Hitler was reportedly humiliated by some parts of his early life. What most people don't know about this man was that in his younger days in Austria, he was homeless. He spent time living in a hostel, what he called the harshest and saddest time of his life. In 2002, The Guardian wrote that the hostel is still open, saying, "The men live in cubicles and the corridors reek of urine." It now seems the hostel has finally closed. Number 47, British involvement. Germany didn't really want to fight against Britain. In fact, Hitler was said to be fond of British culture. The question was, if the UK stayed out of the war, would Germany later subsume the country under its own burgeoning empire? Many people still think that Britain should have stayed out of the war, with some critics saying if Britain hadn't fought that war, there might still be a British empire. Number 46, death toll. The estimates differ a lot, but some numbers have been put out there as to how many military and civilian casualties there were during the war. It's generally thought the Soviet Union lost the most people, at around 27 million lives. China is said to be around 20 million, while Germany lost around 8 million. Japan is somewhere between 2.8 million and 3.1 million lives. UK deaths are thought to number 450,000, and the USA about 418,000. We should add that these numbers are often disputed. Number 45, railway deaths. Around 90,000 laborers and around 12,000 Allied prisoners died building what's sometimes called the Death Railway, a railway connecting Thailand and Burma. You might have heard of one part of it, usually called the Bridge over the River Kwai. The Japanese worked people to death, and military officials would later be tried for war crimes. You can visit the war cemetery in Kanchanaburi in Thailand today, and there you'll find the graves of nearly 3,600 Brits, 1,900 Dutchmen, 1,400 Australians, 12 Indians, 2 New Zealanders, 2 Danes, and 8 Canadians. Number 44, the term Nazi. The word Nazi is just a short version of National Socialist, which means part of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Yes, the Nazi Party was socialist, so you could call that left. This is an ongoing debate, however, seeing as we tend to think of such oppressive regimes as right-wing. You might even call Nazism very far left, as its leader, Hitler, stood against what he called out-of-control capitalists. They also wanted to nationalize major industries. In a speech, Hitler once said, "We are socialists. We are the enemies of today's capitalist system of exploitation, and we are determined to destroy this system under all conditions." You could also say the regime endorsed white nationalism, which we would call right-wing today. Hitler, it seems, misunderstood German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche's theory of the Superman, which was more about being assertive than it was about a superior race. It was all very complicated, so we should probably not use simple terms to define what happened. Number 43, bulging. The Battle of the Bulge was the deadliest battle for American troops. This came at the end of the war, spread out between France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. It was a final push for the Germans, and it's thought about 80,000 American soldiers were injured and 19,000 died. Number 42. Poor Russia. The siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days. The blockades starved the city, and it was an utter disaster, with some historians saying people resorted to cannibalism in the absence of food. Nothing got in, nothing got out, and even fuel was scarce. It's thought about 1 million civilians died. Number 41. The swastika. A sign that will forever give you the creeps, unless you belong to some kind of white nationalist gang, of course. But it's not a bad symbol in its origins, and if you go to India, you'll see it all over the place, but generally not slanted. It's used in the religions of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, and basically it's related to prosperity. The Germans lifted it, and it was supposed to denote pride in Nazism. The Nazi Party called it the Hakenkreuz, or hooked cross. Hitler once wrote, "I myself, meanwhile, after innumerable attempts, had laid down a final form, a flag with a red background, a white disc, and a black swastika in the middle. After long trials, I also found a definite proportion between the size of the flag and the size of the white disc, as well as the shape and thickness of the swastika." It was supposed to symbolize strength and power, and Hitler linked this to a supreme race, the Aryan race, which in Hitler's eyes were Caucasian people, ideally with blonde hair and blue eyes. The word Aryan actually comes from Indo-Iranian. Number 40. Churchill's S. The British wartime leader Winston Churchill is certainly a fascinating man. For some Brits, he's emblematic of the stiff upper lip, a no-nonsense attitude, and for others, he was a warmongering bigot. What's true? We don't know, but we can tell you that this man came to be known as one of the greatest orators of all time. But he actually couldn't speak very well in one sense. Churchill had a speech impediment, what's known as a lisp. He had problems pronouncing his S's and his SH's. To practice, he'd repeat to himself lines such as, "The Spanish ships I cannot see, for they are not in sight." Number 39. German resistance. Many Germans did not look too fondly on Nazism and Adolf Hitler. A German resistance didn't much like Hitler's hardline on religion, Judaism, and the aggression he endorsed in general. In fact, assassinations of Hitler were planned, and one attempt very nearly worked. It's said about 77,000 German citizens were killed because they were part of this resistance. Number 38. Germany.
Okay, I'm gonna go play zombies. See ya. Or maybe Saints Row the Third.
Rules the air. It's generally thought that Germany had the superior air force, called the Luftwaffe during World War II. The German fighter aircraft, the Focke-Wulf FW-190, was regarded as the best. Of course, this is debated. Number 37. The Blitz. German aircraft bombed England repeatedly in 1940 and 1941, and this was known as the Blitz. London was the focus, but so were industrial centers such as Manchester, Sheffield, and Birmingham. This wasn't a great time for kids, so around 3 million young folks were evacuated from big cities to the countryside. Huge evacuations of kids, and sometimes women, also happened in Russia, Germany, and Japan. Number 36. Fanta. Fanta was invented during World War II because a trade embargo forbade Coca-Cola from selling Coke in Germany. So the company came up with a new drink, Fanta, whose name is said to come from the German word fantasy. Number 35. When war works. War makes some people a lot of money, as arms export statistics show today. But should you play for both sides? IBM did just that, selling the Nazis technology to identify Jews. But in general, people got rich if they owned or invested in munitions, steel, and shipyards. The New Republic writes that World War II was great for the American economy, and there was also a massive spike in employment during the war in the US. Number 34. Dunkirk. Okay, you saw the movie. It's real, but wasn't as loud in real life as the movie was, according to one survivor. About 340,000 men were saved in northern France when they were picked up by fishing boats and pretty much anything else that floated. They were mostly Brits that were saved, but also Canadians, Belgians, and Frenchmen. Number 33. The Eastern Front. The Eastern Front was a battle that took place over around 1,000 miles of front. It's known as the biggest confrontation in war history, called by the Russians the Great Patriotic War. The Atlantic tells us that around 27 million Soviet soldiers and civilians died during the 4 years the battles raged. It's said around 4 million German troops also died. Number 32. The Holocaust. It's said the word originates from the Greek. The two parts are holos, meaning whole, and kaustos, meaning burned. It's generally agreed upon that between 1941 and 1945, the German genocide against the Jews resulted in around 6 million Jewish deaths, which was thought to be around 2/3 of the Jewish population of Europe. Yad Vashem, an Israeli Holocaust research agency, writes that 4 million people died in concentration camps and another 2 million as a result of other operations. It's written that many of the people in the concentration camps died after being liberated because they were in such poor health. At Bergen-Belsen, the one-time home of child diarist Anne Frank, it said about 13,000 people died after the British and Canadians had liberated the camp in 1945. The camp had also held prisoners of war, and over 4 years, it's thought about 20,000 Russian POWs died there. Number 31, morbid experiments. It said that Dr. Joseph Mengele, aka the Angel of Death, conducted medical experiments on children in those camps. It said that he would use twins for these experiments, with one surgery consisting of trying to sew 2 twins together to make conjoined twins. Number 30, Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses were also persecuted during World War II. About 6,000 of them ended up in the concentration camps. Number 29, a Superman dive. A soldier called Jack Lucas lied to get into the military at age 14. He became the youngest Marine ever to receive the Medal of Honor. How did that happen? The New York Times wrote after his death that he jumped on grenades at Iwo Jima when he was just 17 to save the other men in his trench. A couple of grenades rolled into the trench, Lucas said in an interview. I hollered to my pals to get out and did a Superman dive at the grenades. He had to go through 26 operations after that. It said this lucky man also later survived a parachute failing to open. Number 28, carrot vision. Does eating carrots really improve your eyesight? No is the answer. It originated during World War II when Britain's Air Ministry made it up and made sure the Germans heard about it. The reason, they said, is because the Brits had invented something called airborne interception radar, which was excellent at spotting German bombers. The Brits wanted the Germans to think it was the heavy carrot intake of the forces and not the technology that made them so good at seeing the bombers. Number 27. The British ate it up too. The propaganda worked on the British people as well, and so mothers and fathers for many years to come would tell their kids to eat carrots so they would have better eyesight. The fiction seems to have left Britain and crossed oceans. While beta-carotene in carrots may prevent cataracts, studies show this is not a big deal. Lots of vegetables can prevent ill health. Number 26. Greenland isn't for sale. After the war, the US tried to buy Greenland from Denmark, offering $100 million. They saw the Arctic island as being strategically based to put their troops. Denmark didn't want to sell, but the US put military bases there anyway. Number 25. Naming planes. Enola Gay was the name given to the US B-29 bomber that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. It was named after the mother of the pilot, one Colonel Paul Tibbets. Number 24. More naming of planes. The name of the B-29 that dropped the bomb on Nagasaki was Boxcar. It was named after the captain, Frederick C. Bach. Number 23. Political correctness or lack thereof. During the war, male US Marines often referred to female Marines as BAMs. The acronym stood for Broad-Assed Marines. It said that the women had their own name for the men, which was HAMs. This stood for Hairy-Assed Marines. Number 22. Tea or coffee. Lots of US servicemen were sent over to the UK. These fast-talking, gum-chewing guys were often popular with the British women, as well as kids who sometimes got handed some candy. Rationing in the UK didn't allow many treats. There was even a booklet given to these guys that offered them information about the UK. In it was written, the British don't know how to make a good cup of coffee. The Americans don't know how to make a good cup of tea. It's an even swap. Number 21. Swinging. Psychology Today tells us that the term swinging probably started with US pilots. One researcher writes that pilots and their wives shared each other as a kind of tribal bonding ritual, with a tacit understanding that the 2/3 of husbands who survived would look after the widows. So, swinging started as an act of goodwill, you could say. Maybe you could say it still is. Number 20. Desertion. About 20,000 US troops deserted during the war, but only one man was ever executed for it. In fact, he is the only American ever to be executed for the act of running away from his duties. His name was Eddie Slavik. According to History.com, Slavik would be shot to death by a 12-man firing squad in eastern France in January of 1945. None of the riflemen so much as flinched, believing Slavik had gotten what he deserved. Number 19. Liberty Stakes. It's written on some websites that during World War I and World War II, the name hamburger was changed in the US to Liberty Steaks. However, more research reveals that this was in no way connected to government decree, but indeed, some restaurants would rename these sandwiches as a morale booster. But at the time, many foodstuffs were called Liberty something or other. Number 18. Killing short people. We are told that the Nazis had a despicable project called the T4 euthanasia program, which was involuntary euthanasia. It is described like this by one source. The euthanasia program targeted for systematic killing mentally and physically disabled patients living in institutional settings in Germany and German annexed territories. Some websites tell us that because of this, it was hard to find Oompa Loompas for the 1970 movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We are told that the film's producers, looking for very short people in Germany, as that's where it was made, had a very hard time finding anyone. We cannot find too many sources to back this up though. Number 17. It could have been Kyoto. The city of Kyoto was going to get the A-bomb treatment. It only escaped that fate because Secretary of War Henry Stimson, who'd visited the ancient city in the 1920s, wanted it taken off the list. Number 16. Pearl Harbor. 96 ships were anchored at Pearl Harbor. It's said 8 battleships were sunk or destroyed or badly damaged, with a total of 18 ships sunk or damaged. Add to that 350 aircraft damaged or destroyed, the tally of lives lost was 2,402, with 1,280 people injured. Number 15. Percentages. It's thought, in terms of percentage of the population during the war, the Soviet Republic of Belarus lost about 25% of its population. Poland wasn't far behind, losing almost 16 to 17% of its population. In terms of depopulation, these two places were the hardest hit, with Ukraine not too far behind. Number 14. The lobotomy files. In 2013, the Wall Street Journal published information about what was called the lobotomy files, which until then had been secret information. The files included information stating that around 2,000 US veterans had been given lobotomies by their doctors because their war traumas were seen as untreatable. These included terrible depression, PTSD, and even schizophrenia. The report even states that the procedure was performed at times on people identified as homosexuals. It said after that, most of these people were like children, unable to take care of themselves. Number 13. No meat, please. Adolf Hitler was a vegetarian. When he became one is up for debate. A woman called Margot Walk, who during the war had been given the daunting task of being Hitler's food taster, once told the press it was all vegetarian, the most delicious fresh things from asparagus to peppers and peas served with rice and salads. Many theories exist as to why Hitler was vegetarian, from him believing it was the correct diet for a strong race, or the book Inside the Third Reich stating that he hated cruelty to animals. In 1937, the New York Times wrote, "It is well known that Hitler is a vegetarian and does not drink or smoke." Others say he was strict like this to show Germany he could be strong and ascetic, so it was more related to morale. Number 12. Not a good place to work. U-boat comes from the German U-boot, which is short for Unterseeboot, which means undersea boat. Yes, in English we call them submarines. It depends what source you read, but all agree that chances of survival on U-boats was not good. The Naval Historical Society of Australia writes that during World War II, 28,000 German U-boat crews of the total 40,900 men recruited into the service lost their lives, and 5,000 were taken prisoners of war. Number 11. We Can Do It. You've probably all seen the We Can Do It poster, in which a strong-looking woman wearing a headscarf is flexing her bicep. It was created by J. Howard Miller in 1943 for the American firm Westinghouse Electric, and its purpose was to boost worker morale. Most people don't know that at the time, very few people in America or the world saw this poster. It wasn't well known until feminists adopted it in the 1980s. Number 10. The People's Car. Volkswagen was partly the brainchild of Adolf Hitler. He wanted all Germans to have a car, not just the rich ones, so he helped create an affordable standard car for everyone. That's what the name means, Volkswagen, or People's Car. Such a car had been conceived prior to Hitler, but it was his backing that really got production going. Number 9. A bold move. In May of 1941, Adolf Hitler's deputy Rudolf Hess decided to parachute into Scotland. One Scot told the BBC many years after, "He had surrendered his pistol to my father and torch to another member of the guard." The BBC writes of the matter, Hess's reasons for flying to Scotland have never been fully explained, sparking countless conspiracy theories over the years. Some say he was trying to broker a peace deal with Germany and Britain. It didn't work out, and he was arrested. He later died in jail after being sentenced at the Nuremberg trials. Number 8. Man of the Year. Time magazine started its Man of the Year thing in 1927. Hitler was Time's Man of the Year in 1938. The award, if you can call it that, doesn't mean that Time is extolling that figure, but rather that the person is a figure that had a big impact in that year. In that issue, Time wrote that Hitler was the greatest threatening force that the democratic, freedom-loving world faces today. Number 7. The salute. Some people say the Nazi open-handed salute originated in ancient Rome. Of the salute, Hitler once wrote, "It must be regarded as a survival of an ancient custom, which originally signified, 'See, I have no weapon in my hand.' I introduced the salute into the party at our first meeting at Weimar." Number 6. Horrors in Poland. There were a minority of people that harbored some ill feelings towards Poles for concentration camps being built in Poland. But many non-Jewish Poles were killed in these camps, and if you believe the dark novel The Painted Bird, life was hell for Poles anywhere close to the camps. It said 75,000 non-Jewish Poles lost their lives at Auschwitz-Birkenau, and around 200,000 died at Warsaw. Number 5. The typhus lie. In more positive news, it said that a young Polish doctor called Eugene Slawomir Lazowski saved about 8,000 Jews from a likely death in a concentration camp. It said he injected dead typhus cells in patients, which after a test would look like they carried the virus, but they didn't actually have it. Meanwhile, he told the Germans there was an epidemic of typhus, and so the Germans stayed well away from about a dozen villages, and the good doctor was able to save lives. Number 4. The rape of Berlin. Back to the bad news, it said that once Soviet troops had amassed on Berlin, around 100,000 German women were raped. Historians estimate that around 2 million German girls and women were raped throughout the country at the end of the war. It said soldiers from other Allied armies were also responsible for these terrible acts. Number 3. The missing Japanese soldier. In 2014, the New York Times wrote that the Japanese soldier Hiru Onoda had died aged 91. What was special about him? Well, he hid out on a small island in the Philippines for 29 years after the war had ended, refusing to believe that it had. He returned after those decades to Japan, and he was seen as a hero. There is a book about him called No Surrender, My 30-Year War. Number 2. Shame. It said that around 425,000 German prisoners were held at 700 camps in the United States during World War II. They didn't generally try to escape, and some were even allowed out due to an honor system. The New Yorker writes that black soldiers in the south of the country were still not allowed in segregated restaurants, while those German POWs that had been given some time out were allowed in those places. Number 1. War Bear. We'll end on a light note and talk about the bear that became a corporal in the Polish army during the war. While it sounds like fake news, this bear named Wojtek was real and brought up from a cub by Polish army personnel. He went where the troops went and did what they did. He would accept lit cigarettes, take a puff, and swallow them, said Dimitar Zaulugo, a Polish soldier, in a Time magazine article. He loved to drink from a beer bottle, and when it was empty, he would look through the opening to see where the rest of the beer was. When not indulging in bad habits, he'd do heavy work for these soldiers and often carry live ammunition on the front lines. He ended up in Scotland, where some Polish fighters were stationed after the war, and that's where the tame bear died in 1963. There is so much we didn't talk about, particularly because some of the facts are just too depressing. Feel free to head on over to the comment section and add some lesser known facts about World War II there. Also, be sure to check out our other video called 50 Facts About the Cold War You Didn't Know. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time!
Hi, I'm Ed Lazier. I'm a senior fellow at Stanford's Hoover Institution.
Turn hut, motherfuckers! My name is Sam, and today I'm here to talk to you all about World War II. The cataclysmic 20th century war is a perennial favourite subject for movies, TVs and video games, but I'd wager there's an awful lot you probably don't know about the 6-year conflict. Oh damn it, I just gave you a fact in the intro. Never mind, you can have that one for free. So, how did a dog deliciously named Chips help the US Army? How did London foil German bombers with balloons? And when is Inglourious Bastards 2 coming out? 2 out of 3 of those questions are going to be answered, so stick on your gas mask, keep calm, and carry on watching 101 Facts About World War II. Number 1. The subject of World War II is immensely complex and detailed, so discussions about it are exactly that, complex and detailed. And surprisingly, not all that easy to put into a 101 Facts format. However, summed up in the simplest, broadest manner possible, World War II was a devastating global war that lasted from 1939 to 1945, involving the vast majority of the world's nations. Number 2. A global war is one that involves many of the world's countries, or most of the prominent and powerful ones. It's commonly agreed that there have only been 2 global wars in history so far, which are creatively known as World War I and World War II. Number 3. World War II officially began in 1939, although related conflicts began earlier, sort of like warm-up friendlies before the main tournament, if we're going to be offensively simplistic about it. Number 4. For instance, Japan was already at war with China when World War II broke out, in a conflict known as the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japan believed the only way to solve its economic woes was to expand and gain more territory, which it attempted to do by invading China. It's a bit like not being able to pay your mortgage, so you just take over your neighbour's house. More on that later. Number 5. World War II officially began on the 1st of September 1939 with the invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany, and the subsequent declarations of war on Germany by Britain and France. Number 6. Adolf Hitler, that absolute arse, was the leader of the Nazi Party, in case you weren't aware. Along with his cartoonishly evil plans for world domination, Hitler also wanted to make sure the Aryan race dominated by wiping out impurities, which he considered were Jewish people, Romani people, disabled people, and gay people. Told you, he was an arse. Number 7. The war was fought between two opposing military alliances, one known as the Allies and the other known as Axis. Spoiler alert, the Allies won, just in case you didn't know. Number 8. The Axis was a loose alliance of expansionist countries, i.e. countries that wanted to get bigger, aligned against the Allies. While they agreed on their opposition to the Allies, they were not completely in coordination, and essentially had different reasons for going to war. Number 9. The Axis got its name from Benito Mussolini. Following a treaty between Germany and Italy, Mussolini declared that from then on the rest of Europe, and indeed the rest of the world, would revolve around the axis of Rome and Berlin. See, it's not just a cool-sounding word. Number 10. In response, the Allies were formed to oppose Axis aggression. The Allies were known as the United Nations after the 1st of January 1942 declaration, and after the war the Allies were the foundations of the creation of what we now know as the United Nations. Number 11! Between late 1939 and early 1941, Nazi Germany managed to conquer and control much of continental Europe. Despite a large number of combined army personnel, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg and France proved no match for the likes of those Nazi scumbags. Number 12.
Hold on.
On the 22nd of June 1941, the European Axis powers decided to invade the Soviet Union, which opened the largest land theatre of war in history. Known as Operation Barbarossa, which is surprisingly nothing to do with Jeffrey Rush's character in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, the plan would ultimately end in total failure, partially due to the somehow unexpected horror of Russia's infamously treacherous winters. Brr. Number 13. Insanely, before being attacked at Pearl Harbor and joining the Allies, the United States was home to many Nazi supporters. Among them was the German-American Bund, which was formed to encourage a favourable view of Nazi Germany. Oh, you done goofed, German-American Bund, you done goofed. Number 14. It's become fairly well known that several members of the royal family and many British aristocrats had links to Hitler and his party. Edward VIII was an admirer of the Führer, and in 2015, footage emerged showing a 6-year-old Queen Elizabeth being taught the Nazi salute. Number 15. Hitler had designed the Nazi insignia himself. The red represented the social idea of Nazism, the white stood for nationalism, and the black swastika represented the struggle, I'm doing the inverted commas there, of the Aryan man. Number 16. However, he did not invent the famous Nazi symbol. The swastika was actually an ancient symbol of spiritual and religious power and was widely used in Indian subcontinents. But ever since Hitler stole it, it's unsurprisingly been left with a truly awful reputation. Number 17. At about 10 to 8 on the morning of the 7th of December 1941, hundreds of Imperial Japanese aircraft attacked the American naval base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Almost 2,500 people were killed, several American warships were sunk or damaged, and almost 200 American planes were destroyed. And Michael Bay made a film about it, but that was a long time later. The next day, President Roosevelt declared war on Japan. Number 18. So why did Japan attack the United States at Pearl Harbor in the first place, I hear you ask? Well, after Japan invaded China, the United States leveled a number of economic sanctions and trade embargoes against them, expecting this to halt their desire to grow so aggressively. Instead, it just seemed to make them more determined. Number 19. Nobody expected Japan to attack Hawaii in this way. It's around 4,000 miles away, and there are a number of more obvious targets much closer to Japan. However, this actually made Pearl Harbor a prime target, as it was relatively undefended with many ships and planes moored very closely together. Number 20. Because the assault was carried out without warning or a formal declaration of war, the attack on Pearl Harbor was ruled a war crime at the Tokyo trials. Gosh, this is a fun video this week, isn't it? Number 21. In the closing stages of World War II, Japan began to carry out suicide attacks known as kamikaze, which involved pilots flying their planes directly into their targets. This was thought to be more effective at destroying Allied warships than their conventional methods of attack, and showed how desperately they were losing. It's also the inspiration behind an attack of the same name in the video game series Worms. Not relevant? No, let's move on. Number 22. Kamikaze means divine wind in Japanese, which is a reference to the typhoons that destroyed an invading Mongolian fleet in the 13th century, saving Japan from attack. Number 23. Estimates of how many kamikaze pilots actually hit their intended target vary somewhat, but one analysis put the hit rate as low as 11%. Most kamikaze pilots were either shot down or missed their targets entirely. Number 24. However, they did manage to sink 47 Allied ships and damage 300 others. Good for them, I guess? No. Ultimately, the kamikaze effort wasn't enough to counter the growing Allied advantage in the Pacific. Number 25. As you may be aware, this video isn't as hilarious as the others, and just as a warning, here's the part where things get ultra dark and serious. Between 1941 and 1945, Nazi Germany carried out a campaign of genocide known as the Holocaust. The primary victims of the Holocaust were Jewish people. Extensive study of this period confirms that approximately 6 million Jews were murdered. Number 26. In Hebrew, the Holocaust is known as the Shoah, which means catastrophe or destruction. Number 27. Along with Jewish people, Romanis, ethnic Slavs, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses, and gay men were among those persecuted in the Holocaust. Number 28. The camps and death centres were set up in Poland to facilitate the Nazis' final solution. At the height of operations, up to 6,000 people were gassed every day at Auschwitz. Number 29. Among the horror of the Holocaust, small stories of hope do shine through. Prisoner Stanisława Leszczyńska, who was a midwife, delivered over 3,000 babies while she was imprisoned at Auschwitz. Many hospitals and organisations in Europe were named after her in her honour. Number 30. One of the most iconic figures of World War II was Anne Frank, hiding from the Nazis with her family and neighbours because they were Jewish. You remember her, she's the lady who Justin Bieber said would probably been a believer. Anyway, Anne's diary gave great perspective to people all around the world of the dangers and the urgency of survival for the Jewish people. Number 31. Anne Frank and her sister Margot were sent to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in 1945, and she died just 1 month before the camp was liberated by the British. It was said that 50,000 people were killed in this camp. Number 32. Max Heilger was a fake name the SS used to make bank accounts when they laundered stolen money, jewels and gold from European Jews. The name Heiliger is a cynical Nazi attempt at humour, as it comes from the German Heilig, meaning holy. Number 33. Before the Nazis decided on the final solution, they had the Madagascar plan, which was nothing to do with the DreamWorks hit film of the same name. The plan was to relocate the Jewish population of Europe to Madagascar, where it would be run as a police state and most of the deported Jews would perish as a result of the island's harsh conditions. Number 34. The tide began to turn against the Axis powers in 1942 when Japan lost the critical Battle of Midway. Prior to this battle, the Japanese were on the offensive, but a decisive victory for the US Pacific Fleet gave the Americans and the rest of the Allies the advantage in the Pacific. Number 35. Hitler ended up executing 84 of his own generals, mainly for plotting against him. See, even his mates thought he was a knob. Number 36. One such general was Klaus von Stauffenberg, who tried to assassinate Hitler using a bomb in a suitcase. The bomb killed several people, but all Hitler suffered from were some ruined trousers from the bomb, rather than anything else. Number 37. The war ultimately ended with the invasion of Germany by the Allies and the Soviet Union, culminating in the Battle of Berlin, days after which Hitler committed suicide and Germany surrendered. Hooray! F you, Hitler! Number 38. Hitler killed himself along with his wife, Eva Braun. Braun died of cyanide poisoning, but reports differ on how Hitler killed himself, whether it was just the poison or a combination of cyanide and a gunshot wound through the mouth. Number 39. Following their suicide, the bodies of Hitler and Brawl were taken out through the back exit of the Führer bunker, doused in petrol, and set alight, all of which were Hitler's own orders. Number 40. Germany offered its unconditional surrender on the 8th of May 1945. Hooray! This day was declared Victory in Europe Day and is celebrated in many European countries. The 8th of May is also Enrique Iglesias' birthday, although I don't think these two facts are particularly related. Number 41. However, Japan refused to surrender. This prompted the United States to drop 2 atomic bombs in Japan. First in Hiroshima on the 6th of August 1945, and then 3 days later on the 9th in Nagasaki. Number 42. Estimates of the combined death total of the 2 bombs varies between a conservative 150,000 up to a horrifyingly possible 300,000 people. Number 43. Survivors of atomic bombs in Japan are called hibakusha, which means explosion-affected people. Particularly lucky or unlucky people, depends how you look at it, who survived both explosions were known as Niju hibakusha, essentially meaning double explosion-affected people. Though dozens of said people are thought to exist, only one man, Tsutomu Yamaguchi, has been actually recognized by the government of Japan as a survivor of both the blasts. Number 44. Had the United States deemed it necessary for a 3rd atomic bomb, the city targeted would have been Tokyo. Number 45. Following the targeted before in Tokyo.
Saitama! Saitama is a city.
45. Following these devastating atomic attacks, Japan surrendered on the 15th of August 1945. The official surrender document was signed on the 2nd of September, officially bringing the Second World War to an end. That was 101 facts about World War II. Oh no, wait, we're only at fact 45? Well, alrighty then. Number 46. After the war concluded, the victorious powers, the United States, the Soviet Union, China, the United Kingdom, and France, became the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Number 47. Despite their shared victory in World War II, the Soviet Union and the United States emerged as rival superpowers, and spent the next 46 years competing in a series of international penis measuring contests known as the Cold War. They also both became obsessed with space too, but I've spoken about that for nearly 2 weeks in a row now, so I won't bring it up again. Number 48. So-called rat lines were a network of escape routes that were set up for fascists to flee Europe after the war ended. Many escaped to South America, Australia, Canada, and the Middle East. These rat lines weren't just tunnels, by the way, otherwise we could all use them instead of airplanes. Number 49. There were some brave doggos during the war. One of the most famous World War dogs was Smokey the Yorkshire Terrier, who would use his extraordinarily strong sense of smell to warn off incoming artillery shells. Smokey was part of a dozen combat missions and survived over 150 air raids. Number 50. Another famous dog was Chips, who was a German Shepherd Siberian Husky mix, but was weirdly on the Allies' side. Aw, who's a cute little spy. Chip helped capture 10 enemy Italian soldiers and was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the Purple Heart, and the Silver Star for his bravery. However, these awards were later revoked, as it was thought giving such honours to dogs was demeaning the human soldiers who had also earned them. Number 51. During World War II, a fully grown reindeer called Pollyanna was kept aboard the British submarine HMS Trident for 6 weeks. The Russians gave the animal to the crew as a gift. Thanks, Russia? Number 52. Soldiers from Poland, while in Italy, enlisted the help of a bear called Wojtek to help them carry ammunition while travelling. The bear was purchased as a cub and was raised as a pet. After the war, he lived out the rest of his days in Edinburgh Zoo. Number 53. Around 550,000 Jewish men served in the US Armed Forces. However, only 2 Jewish soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor. Number 54. 650,000 Jeeps were built during the war, and the US produced 300,000 military aircraft and 89,000 tanks. Tanks for the memories. I shouldn't laugh really, people died. Number 55. They also produced 3 million machine guns and 7 million rifles. As my grandmother used to say, you can never have too many guns. Number 56. The Nazi salute was influenced by salutes of Italian fascists, who claim that the arm movement descends from an ancient salute from the Roman Empire. However, very little evidence for this claim actually exists. Many academics point to the 1784 painting by Jacques-Louis David entitled The Oath of the Hierarchy as inspiration for the now pretty taboo gesture. Number 57. The Blitz was a sustained period of bombings against Britain carried out over 8 months, beginning on the 7th of September in 1940. The Luftwaffe dropped 14,000 tons of bombs on the docks and streets of the East End of London. Number 58. The word Blitz comes from the German word for lightning. This would sound cool if it wasn't for the fact that the Blitz actually wasn't a lightning war at all, and it killed loads of people. Number 59. During the Blitz, inflatable barrage balloons were used to protect cities in Britain during the air raid. The balloons were released and trailed by a steel cable. Because of the balloons, the attacking planes would have to fly higher, significantly reducing their accuracy. Additionally, if one of the balloons popped, it would comically whiz out in the air and possibly land on a German plane's windshield. I mean, maybe, in theory. It could have happened. Number 60. Though most of the bombings were concentrated on London, other cities that were targeted during the Blitz were Liverpool, Swansea, Bristol and Birmingham, as well as several others. Number 61. Soho's Saucy Windmill Theatre, which hosted nude performances and all manner of risque entertainment that I definitely have never been to, me, no way, never closed during the Blitz. In fact, the theatre used the phrase, "We never closed," as a slogan for many years after the war. Number 62. The famous "We Can Do It" poster was not seen by a lot of the public, even though it was published in 1942. The poster regained popularity in the 80s in the feminist movement. Number 63. British soldiers were only given 3 sheets of toilet paper per day, while American soldiers were given 22. See, American portions are like my love for Jennifer Lawrence. Huge. Nintendo 64. Irina Sendler is another brave and iconic figure of the war who helped around 2,500 children out of the ghettos in Warsaw to safe places with new identities. She kept a jar of the real names buried in her back garden, but unfortunately almost all of the children's parents had either been killed or gone missing over the course of the war. Number 65. The youngest serviceman was US soldier Calvin Graham, who was aged 21. That's not even that young. Oh no, sorry, I read that wrong. 12. 12? He lied about his age when he enlisted into the Navy, and they never picked up on it. A lying 12-year-old? Never. Number 66. Hitler's nephew, William Patrick Hitler, who changed his surname to Stuart Houston, very, very sensible William, served in the US Navy during the war. In fact, he was wounded in action and was awarded a Purple Heart. Number 67. None of Stuart Houston's sons had any children. According to his son, Alexander, there was no pact to deliberately end the Hitler bloodline, contrary to significant speculation. Number 68. Many consider the largest battle of World War II to be the Battle of Stalingrad. Estimates of the number of men killed in the battle range between 800,000 and 1,600,000, making it one of the bloodiest battles in recorded history.
We lost a soldier!
Number 69.
Keep fighting!
Just a quick break from Stalingrad to say, to make them sound less German, America renamed hamburgers and frankfurters Liberty steaks and Liberty sausages. If that sounds ridiculous, they started calling sauerkraut Liberty cabbage. God damn, America loves freedom, eh? Number 70. The siege of Stalingrad resulted in more Russian deaths, military and civilian, than the US and Britain sustained combined in all of World War II. Number 71. If you're still not getting how many men died at that time, get this. Only 20% of Russian men born in 1923 survived this war. Number 72. The camouflage pattern for the US Navy, or frog skin as it's called, was designed by Norvell Gillespie, the editor of Better Homes and Gardens. Bit of a career change there, but hey, good going.
Keep going! Keep going! Stag is ruling this city when it should be the actual America that we live in. This is not my America. Not my America. Oh no! Darn. Ah, not my America. You all are fake US soldiers. Fake US soldiers. Fake US soldiers. No! Ah! We will win! Nothing will stop the true Americans! Run! Just run! Just run! There's nothing we can do now. We need to surrender. We need to surrender. I can't ask them for forgiveness because we've already started an entire war. Gotta be kidding me. Ah! Kill them all! Just keep running! Keep running, soldiers!
Norvell. Number 73. Rudolf Hess, who was Hitler's deputy, was the last person to be incarcerated in the Tower of London, where he was kept for over a year. Number 74. While Her Maj, Queen Elizabeth II, is often nowadays thought of as a nice old lady in Buckingham Palace, back in World War II she was decidedly more badass. The Queen, who was then known as Princess Elizabeth, served as a driver and mechanic during the war. You go, Liz. Number 75. A lieutenant colonel with the most British name imaginable, John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, no relation to Winston, aka Mad Jack, fought battles during the war with a longbow and a sword, Skyrim style. He's known to have killed at least one enemy with his bow and arrow, which was apparently the last recorded kill with a longbow in war history. Number 76. Britain was still paying back its World War II debt to the US and Canada as late as in 2006. A 50-year payment plan was set up in 1950, and the final instalment was over $80 million, which was paid 6 years late. The Soviet Union had the same program, however, they just flat out refused to pay it back. Number 77. In the course of the Second World War, between 50 million and 85 million people were killed. This makes World War II the deadliest conflict in human history. Yep, just another feel-good video from 101 Facts here. Number 78. 80% of those deaths came from 4 countries: Russia, China, Germany, and Poland. Over 50% of the casualties were civilians, with the majority of those being women and children. Number 79. A number of countries, including Spain, Switzerland, Sweden, and Ireland, remained neutral throughout the war and did not choose either side. Number 80. After rumours that the Nazis were developing a death ray began to surface, British engineer Robert Watson Watts was instructed to develop one too. He correctly believed this was unfeasible, but he did manage to develop one of the first radar systems in the course of his research. Number 81. It's thought that Hitler was taking a nap when the Allies landed on Normandy on D-Day, but nobody dared wake him up because he was known for his outbursts when things didn't go his way. He must have been mega pissed when he woke up, and a pissed Hitler can't have been nice. Number 82. Robert Capa was the brave photographer who took photos on D-Day and various other events during the war. His D-Day photos were called the Magnificent 11. He had taken 106 pictures in total, but most of them had perished in a photo lab accident. Number 83. Russia was one of the first countries to have women on the front line. Almost 1 million Soviet women took up arms as snipers, fighter pilots, etc., etc. Number 84. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was a particularly notable example of a female fighter for the Soviets. She racked up an impressive and unsettling 309 confirmed kills, 36 of which were German snipers. No word on whether or not they were 360 no-scopes though. Number 85. Speaking of snipers, another terrifyingly efficient stealth-killing machine was Simo Häyhä, a sniper for the Finnish army. He is thought to have killed over 500 Soviet soldiers, earning him the nickname of the White Death. Number 86. Finland never actually joined either the Allies or the Axis, and was actually already at war with the Soviet Union at the outbreak of World War II. Needing help in 1940, the Finnish joined forces with the Nazis to fight the Soviets, according to CNN. When peace between Finland and the Soviet Union was announced in 1944, Finland joined with the Soviets to fight the Germans. Number 87. The German city of Konstanz was not bombed by the Allies because the city left all the lights on at night, so it looked like it was part of Switzerland, which was, of course, neutral. This blurred the lines between the two, and the Allied pilots did not want to risk bombing Switzerland by accident. Number 88. Teddy Roosevelt's son, Ted, who was given the Medal of Honor posthumously for leading soldiers in Normandy, actually fought in both World War I and World War II. Busy guy. Number 89. When the production of Coca-Cola in Nazi Germany became impossible because of the, war, German manufacturers had to come up with a new drink that would be easier to make with a mishmash of ingredients they actually had. That beverage is now known as Fanta. Number 90. Weirdly enough, the first German serviceman killed in the war was killed by the Japanese. Huh? Number 91. Weirdly enough again, the first American serviceman was killed by the Soviet Union. Huh? Number 92. During World War II, the largest Japanese spy ring was actually located in Mexico. Wow, that's actually a good idea. I sure never saw that coming. Number 93. An Imperial Japanese intelligence officer by the name of Hiro Onoda fought in World War II and never surrendered in 1945. When the war ended, Onoda was hiding out in the Philippines and rejected attempts to convince him that the war was over until 1974. Eventually, his former commander had to travel from Japan to personally relieve him of duty, at which point he was pardoned by the President of the Philippines due to exceptional circumstances. Number 94. The only battle ever fought on US soil was the Battle of Attu, on Attu Island, which is an incorporated territory of the United States. Japanese forces had